Good afternoon, this is John Taylor, SSTV Australia. Bangladeshi Refugees of Australia hosts a special gathering in Sydney. The streets of Sydney City vibrated with humanitarian appeal. Hundreds of refugees protest for permanent visas in Canberra, Sydney City. Tony Burke MP reassured his support for freedom of speech and human rights in Bangladesh. Asylum seeker Payam received a letter saying Australia is not an option. He wasn't the only one. Bangladeshi Refugees of Australia hosts a special gathering in Sydney. A special meeting of the Bangladeshi Refugees of Australia Incorporated was convened at an auditorium in Lakemba, Sydney on Sunday, July 3, 2022, at 5:30 p.m. More than 100 community dignitaries and leaders were present as the gathering began with a recital from the Holy Quran. The streets of Sydney City vibrated with humanitarian appeal. Thousands of refugees and supporters are expected to converge at Sydney Town Hall. Asylum seekers supporters marched from Sydney Town Hall to Hyde Park. The rally called on the new Labor government to convert temporary protection visas and SHEVs to permanent ones immediately after refugees have spent up to 10 years without family and having their children miss out on university. 2 p.m. Sunday the 24th of July 2022. Boats being sent back and offshore detentions need to end for good. The opening speech was delivered by Hun Senator David Shoebridge, Greens NSW, with more speeches after from Ian Rintal Refugee Action Coalition, Ramasaya, Ramza Sabaniasam Medevac refugee from PNG, Ali Naif Australian Refugees in Limbo, MD Abdullah Yousuf, Bangladeshi Refugees of Australia Inc. Chief Advisor, Renuga in Pekuma Tamil Refugee Council, Kian Galia Vice President, Australian Young Labour. The rally is part of national protests to mark the 9th anniversary of the 19th of July 2013, when Kevin Rudd declared Pacific Solution 2 and that asylum seekers who arrived by boat would be sent to Manus Island and Nauru and never allowed to settle permanently in Australia. 19 July set the stage for the coalition's Operation Sovereign Borders and was the beginning of 9 long years of abuse and demonisation of refugees and people seeking asylum. The end of the Morrison government has left over 19,000 refugees on temporary protection visas and SHEVs. People who worked during the pandemic are separated from their families, denied the right to travel, and their children denied tertiary education. Labor has promised they will all be granted permanent visas, but they are still waiting to hear when and how that is going to happen. Thousands of others are on bridging visas that must be renewed every 6 months. Afghanistan is firmly in the grip of the Taliban and the crisis has paralyzed Sri Lanka. Thousands of people from Sri Lanka and Afghanistan who can never return to their countries are victims of the fast-track processing system that has rejected their protection claims. Thanos, a Tamil refugee brought to Australia from PNG under the Medevac laws, said, "July 19th policy has destroyed our lives, continues to make us suffer. This government could change 1 or 2 words in this visa, just to let us study, to travel, but there has been no change. We can look after ourselves, we need permanent resettlement. A permanent visa, that is it, that is all." When he was elected, Anthony Albanese declared that no one would be left behind. But refugees and asylum seekers are being left behind, said refugee leader Ian Rintal. Spokesperson for the Refugee Action Coalition, some of the punitive conditions imposed by the Morrison government could be changed with a flick of the minister's wrist. The people left behind in Nauru and PNG could be brought to Australia immediately. More than 500 of the people who were exiled offshore will not have a permanent future unless Labor grants them a permanent future. MD Abdullah Yousuf, Bangladeshi Refugee Chief Advisor, said, "Our refugee brothers sisters did not come here for holiday. The government of Bangladesh is targeting students, business people, and opposing politicians, as well as enforcing their disappearances and extrajudicial killing. That's why they are unable to stay there. The current government of Bangladesh oppresses innocent people, so they have no choice but to run away from the country." When they came to Australia in order to save their lives, the Australian government continues to play with them. It is time to see what the current government did. Bangladeshi refugees are suffering from their own High Commission and Consulate. They are government servants but treat refugees like animals. Refugees need to be treated as equals and fairly like others. He urged and requested the Australian government please give them, refugees and asylum seekers, a chance. Accept them as permanent visa holders and give them the opportunity to contribute to the community, shoulder to shoulder, in society. All the refugees are very tired. After 10 years, they have waited for enough. Bangladeshi Refugees of Australia Incorporated, BRA, arranged excellent large banners and t-shirts, as well as some colourful play cards which attracted many of the audience. Suprovat Sydney, the only Bangladeshi newspaper in Australia, was the media partner of the events. Around 200 Bangladeshi refugees joined and took a vital role in the rally. Entire events organised by a senior refugee leader Ian Rintle Refugee Action Coalition, his hard-working team.
Well, thanks so much for all of you for coming out today to speak up and get justice for refugees.
Sorry, it's live.
I'd like to acknowledge this is Gadigal land we've come on to today, and acknowledge those elders past, present and emerging of this land we're on. When we're talking about global justice, and that's what refugee justice is, global justice, we also need to acknowledge the deep need for justice on this country. So we walk with First Nations peoples, we're allies with First Nations peoples, and we acknowledge this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. In just the last few days, we've seen front pages of newspapers in this country leading the major news bulletins on TV outrage about the way the coalition handled refugee policies on the day of the election. And what was the outrage? The outrage wasn't the real crime. The outrage that came from our new Prime Minister and the new Labor ministers wasn't the real crime. The outrage was about, on election day, the coalition told Australia about the brutal ongoing turnback policy that we had. But for me as a Greens MP, the real outrage wasn't saying that on election day, as shameful as the coalition was when it did that. The real outrage was what happened on the sea, when our armed forces turned around a boat full of refugees, men, women and children seeking protection from this country, and turned them back to Sri Lanka where they face ongoing persecution. That was the crime. And that's the policy that needs to end. No more boat turnbacks, no more offshore detention. Let's make this country decent with a new government. And we've heard Labor say that they will give security and end the 19,000 temporary protection visas and give some kind of permanent protection. Well, let's see that happen now. And let's make sure that those children and others who want to go to university can go to university like the rest of us, and can work, and can have secure pathway to citizenship and be a full part of our country. Let's do that for those guys. But let's not forget the 10,000 refugees who came to this country and had their claims rejected by the coalition's appalling fast-track assessment process. Those 10,000 refugees and their families, they live in this country on bridging visas for months and months. Not sure if they can work, not sure how long they'll be here. We need Labor right now today. And make sure that they have a genuine pathway to have their claim to refugee assessment properly analysed. And while we're all about it, let's abolish the AAT and get back to a refugee review tribunal that actually knows about refugees, assesses cases on its merits, and gives genuine refugees a genuine pathway in this country. that looking out on this crowd gives me enormous hope about where we can take this country. Yes, we got rid of Morrison and Dutton and all that rotten mob, but that was only part of the task. The task is to make this country decent again, to live up to the promise that we gave when we entered into international agreements and be a place for refuge for refugees, to end all temporary protection visas, to end all offshore processing, to not turn around another boat, and for this country to open its arms to the world's refugees so as we can be a decent and fair place. That's the challenge. And that's the challenge that this new Parliament must take up. As part of now 16 Greens in that federal Parliament, I can tell you this, we will work every day to turn around those appalling joint policies of Labor and the Coalition, to end offshore detention, and to finally live up to Australia's promise. So thank you for coming out today. Let's make this bigger, let's make this louder, and let's change the country.
Extreme problem, political problem, social problem, economic problem. That's why they are here. Especially, I should mention one of the most corrupt countries, where I am from, Bangladesh. Coming to join this celebration for the refugee, we all need the visa.
Hundreds of refugees protest for permanent visas in Canberra, Sydney City. Hundreds of refugees have rallied outside Sydney's Town Hall at 2 p.m. Sunday, the 18th of September to demand permanent visas for all those refugees and asylum seekers on temporary visas. At the Sydney event, various background leaders' speeches included Ian Rintoul, Refugee Action Coalition leader, Alex Foon, NSW Young Greens Multicultural Officer, Lachlan Good Vice President, NSW Young Labour, MD Abdullah Yousuf, Chief Advisor Bangladeshi Refugees of Australia Inc. Joy Mohammed, Bangladeshi Medevac refugee from Nauru, Azu Naamoni, Iranian SHEV refugee, Vino Selvaraso, Tamil TPV refugee, Ali Naif, Australian refugees in limbo, Sajeda Bahadomia, Rohingya community activist and TPV holder.
On the first, I want to thank the Australian land and people to welcome us. After the last election, we think the sun rise again after the dark times. And the first month of election, Mr. Albanese traveled to many countries to fix the relationship, the international relationship, because Mr. Bulldozer destroyed it. And this is good. But I want to tell him something about us, because he destroyed us too from 2013 until now, when he was Minister of Immigration.
Golden country, 100% true, golden country. But this golden country, every gold have the quality. Every gold have the levels. And the quality, we have to choose the quality. Our choice, I believe, Minister not have power. We have the power. Yeah. Power. Public has the power. Yes. Human being has the power. Our choice. We have to change. People make choice. Our life path for refugee life path.
We need the offshore detention, and I think a couple of people have already made it clear. But it needs to be said. It is not just a question of TPVs and chefs. Not just TPVs and chefs. There are thousands of people who are on bridging visas. There are thousands of people who are on no visas. There are people who are on expired visas. All those people need permanent. Their cases need to be reviewed, and we need to keep fighting for those permanent visas. So that's why we march today. It's not going to be our last march, but I do hope that our voices today are going to make it very, very clear to the Labor Party that we're not going away until we have got permanent visas for all the TPVs, the chefs and the bridging visas, all those people who've been rejected by fast track, all the Afghans who were told it was safe to go back to Kabul, so they never got a bridging visa, all the
As we know, today's demonstration for what? We need justice. We need justice for refugees and all over Australia. whoever in Australia, we need everyone's justice for everyone. As we know, Captain James Cook came this country 27th of August 1770. He didn't fly. He didn't come by any means then. Boat. First fleet, second fleet. We are in the same boat. We're talking about same boat. The people come by boat. We know that story. And waiting such a long time, 9 years still long. 10 years someone waiting for permanent visa. This is unhumanitarian. And as we know, our last government, scum government, didn't done anything.
Tony Burke MP reassured his support for freedom of speech and human rights in Bangladesh. A team led by Suprovat Sydney's editor-in-chief and editor has met Tony Burke MP on the 14th of September 2022, Wednesday afternoon in his office in Punchbowl, Sydney. They congratulated him on the recent electoral win. They expressed their hope that the Member of Parliament will continue to serve the people only towards better, with his further responsibilities as the Minister of Employment and Workplace Relations and Minister for the Arts of Australia. Honourable MP welcomed the team and said he is well aware of the role of Suprovat Sydney in the community. The team also informed him that Suprovat Sydney is the only Bengali community newspaper currently being printed and circulated in Australia. In this meeting, Suprovat Sydney's team consisted of the editor-in-chief, MD Abdullah Yousuf, and the editor, Dr. Farooq Amin. They were also accompanied by the representatives of Bangladeshi Refugees in Australia Inc., Nasir Ahmed and Rashid Ahmed. MD Abdullah Yousuf Shamim informed the Minister about the plight of refugees in Australia, many of whom are suffering from severe problems and issues, although they have acquired various skills and been contributing to the economy over the years. Dr. Farooq Amin informed the Minister about Bangladesh's ongoing freedom of speech and human rights situation. He mentioned that a brother of the editor of a Bengali community newspaper, Surma, published in London, was arrested in Bangladesh the previous day. Similar arrests of family members of Bangladeshi media personnel living overseas have become standard tactics adopted by the oppressive regime. Tony Burke MP, in response, assured the team that his party and government always stand for freedom of speech and human rights. He thanked everyone for their support and wished to continue the cooperation to build a better future for the community. Asylum seeker Payam received a letter saying Australia is not an option. He wasn't the only one. Advocates for those seeking asylum in Australia have said letters sent by the Australian government to a number of refugees and asylum seekers urging them to resettle in other countries has caused immeasurable distress. Numerous people who arrived by boat and have been living in Australia for a number of years have received letters stating,
This is the Bangladeshi Refugees in Australia Incorporated.
Refugees from across the country travelled to Canberra for the protest for permanent visa, demanding the new Labor government immediately make all TPVs and SHEVs permanent visas. But there is still no date from the government when this might happen.
For years, in some cases an entire decade, separated from their families and unable to travel overseas.
After having faced so much cruelty and tragedy and trauma, that is just not acceptable.
Barriers too in finding full-time work or enrolling in university.
How can I study? That's why I'm driving a truck.
Today, patience running thin. Desperation.
10 years, just talking, come here.
I understand. I will continue to fight for you.
Met with consolation.
I am ashamed of this country's response to asylum seekers.
There are around 19,000 people in Australia on temporary visas, Labor pledging to resettle them permanently during the election campaign. More than 100 days in office, the government says it's trying to clear the backlog, but no clear timeline on when that will happen. The opposition warning the approvals will encourage people smugglers. But the Immigration Minister maintaining, we will keep this promise and meet our commitment as soon as possible. This crowd ready and waiting to carve out new lives, many highly skilled and educated. Here too, the nation's future workforce. It's a path forged by a 27-year-old senator who arrived in Australia from Afghanistan as a child. Today, making history.
So as a daughter of a refugee who came to this land with dreams of a safe and better future, I gave myself that audacity to challenge the system and to see how far I would go.
I took Minister Bowen's words in good faith that he was open to sensible amendments.
This will underline the end of 10 years of denial and delay and dysfunction.
Agreement in some areas, but much left to debate.
Prime Minister's time has concluded.
We want to support you. We agree that being on a temporary visa or no visa for year after year after year is unethical, it's hurtful, and it's illegal under international law. And I am ashamed of this country's response to asylum seekers. And when I look along at this fabulous crowd, a really wonderful crowd, thank you so much to all of you for coming out here today and to make the point you are making so clearly. When I look along at this crowd, I see doctors and I see nurses.
Wait is long enough. People have suffered enough. And it's time to see